Hi, this is a short video on how to complete your cultural artifacts analysis project. So I'm going to go into content, and if I click on projects, it will open this menu, and then the cultural artifacts, and I'm going to choose that written overview. This, of course, opens the written overview, and it may change a little every semester, but the concepts here are going to be pretty similar. So if you open your menu over on the side, you can come down to your routes. And first, I'm going to talk about this traditional route. So the traditional route is the way that this assignment is most often done, and it's where we're looking at a specific culture or a group that you might belong to. If you can remember the definition here, we're thinking of a culture as any group of people that have some shared or values or commonalities. So they happen within a particular place, a time, a context. Cultures are socially created and defined, so it is really quite open as to what might qualify as your culture here, okay? We are looking at creating a little mini museum exhibit, if you will. And we're going to use digital projects because, yes, we will share these with the class in a digital or virtual space, but you're not necessarily presenting these. So your final product is, most students tend to choose a slideshow, although certainly you can use a different digital tool that can be shared with groups of students. It is meant to be multimodal, so make sure that you read the article for this week that kind of talks about that. But it should probably not be just a document. That's not the most multimodal tool. So you might think about a slideshow if you really like Prezi, if you enjoyed using story maps, or you want to really test your skills maybe and create a bit of a little mini website or a blog of some sort, that could also work, okay? So what you're basically doing is going to be first providing an overview in which you describe what your culture is, who your culture is. So this is something that you'll really want to make sure that you do some research about. Now, your research might not be from necessarily academic sources, so it might not be academic research, but it should be what we would consider authoritative or credible. So it has to be someone or a group that is qualified to be talking about this particular topic or this particular culture in some way. Excuse me. As I explained in my example in class, I would probably go to the American Diabetic Association if I were talking about people with type 1 diabetes. And while that is not an academic source, that's going to give me a really good overview of what it might be to live with that particular disease. Your next thing is to think of a couple of objects that might in some way represent or symbolize that particular culture or group in some way. For each one, this is where we get kind of the museum aspect. You're going to have that museum description where you explain what the object is, how it's connected to the culture, and also your own personal connections to the particular object. Because remember, we're choosing cultures or communities, groups that we belong to, that we're a part of. And then the third piece of this assignment is to have that annotated bibliography, which we will go over more in class, but you should start finding your research for that. You should start looking for those two sources. I highly recommend that one of your sources is directly related to your culture, And then your second source might be about your culture still, or it might even be about a specific object. Remember that 2 is a minimum, so you know, if you have 2 objects and you need a source for each one and your culture, you could have 3 sources, but you do need at least 2. And then you're going to put this all together. So let me just show you an example here. This is from a previous semester. And this particular group talked about a crafting culture. So people who like to do arts and crafts. And here we have a bit of an overview where they're explaining it, and then they provided a history with kind of even a little bit of a timeline. Now, as you can see, this definitely is going to have some source work here. It's going to have that research where they were able to assemble this timeline. And then they have their objects. Now, we did it in groups at this time, so there are more than 2. You're doing it individually, so you only need 2 objects. So this person described painting tools. They described it and also kind of come into their personal connections. Weaving and cloth art tools, so things like looms. And then embroidery. And then sculpture. And then we have their annotated bibliography where they've included the citation, and then they've summarized and explained how this source fits into their particular project. So this one probably is where they're getting multicultural connections of a craft community, where they're really getting that information for their overview about what is a crafting community. And then they have another source here as well. For the nature route, you're going to do a very similar type of project. It is also going to be that kind of museum exhibit with objects that kind of relate to the ecosystem or the geographic or natural community culture that you are thinking about. So it's going to look very similar in that it's going to have that overview, which kind of explains that ecosystem. Again, this is a great place to find that research that kind of helps you explain it and understand it more for others. And then you're going to have 2 objects. They most likely are going to be natural objects that occur or that are found in this particular ecosystem. Although, as we had talked about briefly, certainly some man-made objects might also fall into an ecosystem, particularly if they have a kind of effect. In my example, if you're thinking of a river and it has a dam, that is man-made. However, it certainly affects that particular ecosystem in some ways. So you would have those 2 objects with their descriptions, and then the bibliography, again, with at least 2 sources, one which is most likely really explaining that ecosystem in some way, and a second one which may be more about the ecosystem or might be looking more at the particular objects that you found within that ecosystem. Again, 2 is a minimum, so you can certainly have additional sources if you need them. I don't have an example project for you. However, the previous example in the traditional route would be very similar for the community engagement. So I'll just show that one more time. Here we had a crafting culture. This would be an ecosystem, not a community like crafting. They have an overview and a history of it, which certainly is going to come from their sources. And then we have, it was a group project at that time, so they have 4 objects: painting tools, weaving cloth, embroidery, and sculpture as different types of arts and crafts that people within this arts and craft community might participate in. And then they have their annotated bibliography with full citations, and then the summary and connection to their project of what that particular source provides for the project that they are looking at. Again, the only thing that really makes the nature route different from this traditional route is that you are looking at a natural ecosystem rather than a culture that is defined and created socially. And the last route, of course, is the community engagement. And this one is where we're really doing something that's quite different from that traditional or natural route or nature. Here, I would encourage you, if you chose to do community engagement, to possibly consider working with that same community for this project, although certainly you can choose a different community if you need to, or if you're just jumping into this route, you may certainly choose that as well. So in this one, you're going to be thinking about a community that you belong to. Once again, we're really looking at something that is part of ourselves, and we're moving from ourselves out into a larger context here. So you don't just want to, I want to go work for this community. You do want to think of something perhaps that you actually do belong to and participate in. So one of the first things that you want to do is develop a survey. A survey that kind of goes and asks people within this community things about, like, what are they interested in? What are some issues or concerns that they feel need to be addressed within and for and by this particular community that you are looking at? So the first piece of your project is going to include the questions that you're going to ask, and I would recommend having at least, maybe 3 to 5 questions there. In fact, we'll even just add that in so to make that clear. And then once you have some results, you should kind of compile those, possibly in charts and graphs to make them just a little bit more visual and to explain what you found out from those questions. So multiple choice questions might be helpful just because then they will allow you to aggregate that data. And then you need to ask at least 3 to 5 people within that particular community. Well, I know that that is not truly a representative sample. We're also trying to keep the work manageable for our time constraints as well. So yes, this is not a very scientifically accurate survey in those ways. After you've done your survey, hopefully you're going to identify some issues or some concerns, and you're going to choose one of those, and this would be a good place to perhaps do some of your research to learn more about that particular issue or concern for this community. And then you are going to create some type of a product that encourages this community to get involved in some way, whatever this issue, this concern might be. That's part of why it's so open, because I don't know what your survey and your research is going to show you, and because I'm not sure what is going to be the best way to reach a particular community. That is really going to depend on who that community is and who belongs and who participates in what different things they might use. So it's really open in that your product could be a social media campaign, it could be a short TikTok video, it could be whatever will be something that would actually reach the community that you're trying to reach. Your third piece, of course, is still that annotated bibliography. And again, I would highly recommend that you have a source maybe that kind of looks at the community in some way, and then possibly a source that looks at the particular issue that that community is facing or is concerned about. The annotated bibliography should have the summary and then the connection of how this research supports your cultural analysis of this particular community. I do not have student examples for you because this is a new piece of the project for me this semester. So I do have a couple of examples that I can show you though. So these are both some social media campaigns. One, the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. While this is kind of big and might not be exactly what you're ready to take on or do, this was just a simple social media campaign where people were encouraged to make videos of themselves dumping ice over their head and then to tag a friend to either dump the ice bucket or to make a donation to ALS. While this may not be a specific community that you belong to, it may be something maybe that you have some personal connections or otherwise are interested in doing some type of activity. So I'm not saying that this is exactly what you need to do, but it does give you some ideas of things that can happen. So this was just a social media campaign, again, for the ALS organization. Another social media campaign that was for type 1 diabetes through out November, which is Diabetes Awareness Month. And people were encouraged to wear blue and then to tell their stories of living with T1D. Specifically using a hashtag that was developed to help spread the message and to bring them together for those who might be searching for them. So just another example of a fairly easy social media type campaign that was meant to spread particular knowledge and information about this disease with people who may not be aware. These are just example projects. You can, it could be, maybe we're trying to, as we is coming up, maybe you're trying to convince college students to go out and vote. But whatever your community identifies as a concern, as an issue, you're going to do a little more research about that and about the community, and then develop some type of product, some type of an infographic, a social media campaign, a video that somehow addresses that community audience and says, hey, here's something you need to know about. Here's something that you should take action and do, okay? That is really the focus of this community engagement route. So we will talk more about how to do the annotated bibliographies in class, but hopefully that gives you just a little bit more information about how to follow your particular route for this project. Please email if you have any questions, and I'll see you next week.